Why is Ballerina Farm so intensely dedicated to this persona? Why does she seem to have no sense of self other than her family and her children? Why is she so odd? I think I have the answer. Most of us as women are operating under the triple threat of expectation in today's society. That is of approval, validation, and praise. And as Dr. Shefali says in her book, A Radical Awakening, this is what is keeping us stuck, miserable, and unfulfilled in our lives. In chapter 1, she talked about how most women are living in the fog of patriarchy, basing their entire identity and self-worth on being chosen by a man. She goes even deeper into chapter 2, talking about this triple threat that women experience. Because all of us are striving for approval, validation, and praise, it makes us ignore our inner calling or voice. Most of us are completely disconnected from what we need and what our essential purpose is here on this earth. I'm going to use Ballerina Farm and Hannah Nealman as an example here. And trust me, I don't want to. I feel like Hannah Nealman has enough oppression from her religion and her husband and from the men in her lives and even the women in her lives. Women will prop up the patriarchy and subjugate other women as easily as men. So I am not trying to hate on her and I am not trying to bring her down further, but I think she is such a good example of a woman who embodies striving for validation, praise, and approval over everything else. The reason why you look at Ballerina Farm and not understanding who she is and like, why is she so driven? Why is she so striving to be perfect? It's almost as if she lives in this other world of reality. Hannah Nealman is an example of a woman who is completely and utterly down to every cell in her body, striving for approval, validation, and praise. And I was Mormon for 44 years of my life, so I think that I can speak very clearly on the expectations of women in that religion. She is quite literally addicted to praise, approval, and validation. And in the Mormon church, you are given all of these three things when you are who Hannah Nealman is. Dr. Shefali says that women are addicted to this praise, approval, and validation, that it is like a drug. We hear this from Hannah Nealman's own mouth as she talks about her dreams and her focus of getting into Juilliard and being a professional ballerina. And she completely left that by the wayside to achieve approval, validation, and praise from her husband and the men around her, the prophet of the church and the male heavenly father. This triple threat, as Dr. Shefali calls it, creates this idea of the good woman. So again, no shade to Hannah Nealman, but she is the epitome of a good woman. She equates her very identity to the qualities of approval, validation, and praise. And I would even argue obedience, as Dr. Shefali talks about in this chapter. In her very essence of the dutiful wife, the homemaker, completely devoted to her children to the point where she leaves all of her passions behind in that pursuit. She embodies the qualities of a good woman, and she gets all the praise and adulation of the good woman because she is operating in the sphere and scope of Mormonism, which is completely centered around women being homemakers, women being dutiful, obedient to their priesthood holders, which is quite literally their husband, the prophet, the male church leaders. It is literally in service to men and in service to children. And that is the entire scope of what is required of a good, dutiful woman. And she embodies that wholeheartedly. And that is why you look at her and you think, what is up with her? She's so out of this world, because she is quite literally so devoted intensely to these identities. As Dr. Shefali says in this chapter, in order to obtain the three valuable drugs of approval, validation, and praise, women especially essentially shapeshift, morphing into whoever those around us wish us to be. In her case, it is what the Mormon Church wishes her to be. But we all do it in our own way. As she says, in their own way, boys also have a standard of conformity. We all do. Culture forces its children to conform and thereby raises us to be inauthentic. Girls just have it inordinately harder because we are trained to not only receive validation for being good in order to perpetuate the power of the patriarchy, but good for women means subservient, lesser than, not equal. Boys, they can be good or bad. In fact, sometimes the badder they are, the more validation they receive. They can even become the president of the United States. So what is the solution to this shape-shifting that so many women get stuck doing? As Dr. Shefali says, the only way to outgrow these archetypes is to shatter them. The only way to shatter them is to eviscerate every false identity they have created within us. We must die to who we have known ourselves to be so that our essence, our true self can come alive and we can begin to live authentically. In my case, I would say that I experienced an ego death in so many ways when I left the religion of my forefathers and I left a long marriage that identified me. For many years, I was floundering around trying to figure out who exactly I am. And I had to lose my reputation. I had to lose the very identities that I had identified with for so long that gave me safety. It was a lonely road. Not many women will do it. And many times women will be the first ones to crucify another woman that dares to do this. You do not get supported by many women in your life. Men especially will hate you because so it threatens their very identity. So you will get pushback from both men and women when you decide to eviscerate these identities. But the alternative is to end up in a state or in a position such as Ballerina Farm, where you completely leave behind your passions and the things that make you you and the things that speak to your heart, and you live for everybody else. Because as I've said in past videos, the patriarchy is created so that women never leave men and that men can have that feminine energy without having to earn it. You end up completely losing your sense of self and living for everybody else.